This is Uncharted, a series of candid conversations about facing uncertainty. When we are called upon to be courageous, the strength of our leadership is tested. Red Direction has developed a library of resources to help you stay aligned, and in particular to develop your true north. Now, here's Jess.
Thanks for joining me today. On this Uncharted, we are going to explore this concept of pivot and what does it mean and how does it show up in real life with Brandi Bernoskie. She is the CEO at Alchemy+Aim. She also runs North Star Sites and leads that team as well. She runs a team of web development and business strategists. They work with thought leaders and entrepreneurs to craft custom websites and enhance client experiences. Not only that, they're thinking about the insightful piece, the questioning piece, that critical piece we need in our business so that we can take our brilliance and what we are good at and mush them together, for lack of a better phrase, into something that sets the stage to open conversations between us and the clients that we are attracting. Brandi, thanks and welcome to the Bold Business Podcast and Uncharted.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Good. I am so glad. Now, the first thing I have to ask is, for those of you watching, you can see all the books behind Brandi, and you know I'm an avid reader, listeners and watchers. So I've got to know, what are your go-to books? We're just going to get that out of the way because I can't.
Okay. Well, I guess it depends like what I'm going to for sort of thing. But I will tell you, like, this is my special little book section right over my like right shoulder.
Yeah.
So I have some of the books that clients of mine have written, but also that have just really resonated in my business overall. Like those kind of reminders of like, there's a better way to do business and to be in the world. So I kind of keep them over my right shoulder, just so even as I'm, on calls and, I'm doing a lot of Zoom calls usually during the day, I see them and I'm like, yes, that's right. That's how to operate again. So.
I wish I could get mine to just that many books. My go-to books take up at least a whole shelf, and they're in two different piles around my office. So when I'm on calls with people, I disappear. They can hear me as I walk around my office, but I'm like, I got to go get the book we need.
And I absolutely do that. I've actually been on calls with clients and I'm like, hold on, I know what you need to read next. And I'm looking at my shelves and pulling, but like, for me, it's really like some of Brene Brown's, all of her books, but her recent work particularly. I really loved Dare to Lead and created some kind of things for my team to do together in order to better understand how we each individually operate based upon what I read there. I love, the things that Mike Michalowicz does with like profit first and just understanding business in different ways is really, really fantastic. And they become a lot of my go-tos of
and, in a moment, we know we can pick up the phone. Our trusted advisors sometimes can't be available when we are, and books are a fantastic set of advisors to help shape that initial response. I've got to send a text. I've got to pick up the phone. I've got to send that email. And it helps with that pause piece, which is what we need when we're thinking about what does our business need now and what change is coming ahead. And that's something that when you and I first talked was really clear to me, that there was this time when you were going through that was really about change is not only necessary, it's upon us. And yes. How did you find that?
Well, I feel like I've actually been in that sort of necessary changes period multiple times in my life of having done one thing and then the world shifting in some ways and realizing that you need to change what you're doing, sometimes significantly and sometimes just in like little ways. The first significant time this happened to me was when I was in college, and I went off to New York University in 1998. So I was in New York in September of 2001. And, I was kind of finishing up my degree there and things like that. And really I was majoring in theater. And it was kind of one of those big world shifts where I was really kind of taken back and had to ask myself, is this really the most I can give to the world, or do I have more? Mm-hmm. And I think that's like, even now after quarantine, it's kind of the same question of, even with my businesses, it's not about abandoning the business, but it's like, how can I reshape the business to give more of what I can give to the world? And do I need to start something new? Do I need to let something go? And, that I've clung to for some reason. So,
isn't that the big
it's
thing? Those things that we
is.
cling to, and
Yes.
we're putting on those rose-colored glasses, and that's really, I think, when the world around us can shake us up some, but recognizing from your very first experience to your very latest experience in terms of that, do you feel like you have increased awareness and you recognize, okay, now I've got to respond in this particular way? We're really evaluating something big.
Yeah, I think just being an entrepreneur has given me a phenomenal sense of increased awareness, but it's also made me less reactive too. So I feel like I'm more reflective about the changes that are happening around me and how I need to respond to those changes, as opposed to simply responding in the moment. I feel like I plot out a little bit more and try to see potential futures, so that, kind of like, well, if I take this path, what does it look like? Is it really going to serve me and my team and my clients in the way that I hope it will? Or is there something that, could I be taking a path that would lead to overwork and overwhelm? Yeah.
Nobody ever wants to look at that path. That's just what went through my head.
But you sometimes don't even realize it. Like, if you don't stop to even like look into the future, you may find yourself on that path because you never took the time to consider what the full outcome could be.
And okay, so before we continue, because I want to hear about this pivot thing, because pivot is like a soapbox for me, and I'm trying to change my potentially negative reaction around that word. So this conversation is going to be really good for me. Before we go there, I want to recognize the pragmatism that you're bringing and the importance of that. Of course, we could only look at the good. Until we look at the not so good, or what could not be good, we really don't have a good picture, and we don't know if the good is good enough or just good at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's one of those things that I know I really think about a lot, as when I'm doing my present retreat, and the time that I spend working on my business is part of that time is, well, what is the worst that can happen? And how prepared are we for the worst that can happen? Because that does nothing but set the boundary and the guide rails, if you will, for recognizing, oh, I have far to go to make sure that we have these guardrails, or we're already there. So this is great. We can put our priorities on something else. And I think that that's an important piece of critical thinking when we're doing strategy for ourselves and for our clients.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely true. It's just, it's not that you're being negative about reflecting on what could go wrong, but you're just preparing yourself for doing even more right with it.
Yes. I'm actually writing that down, to do more right. All right. Yeah. So you were in a space where times are changing, and with the times changing, especially in technology, web design, web development, are you in the digital marketing realm as well?
No, we're not.
Okay.
We actually, we have a lot of partners we work with who do digital marketing, but we kind of stay in the website area, which just allows us to kind of like hone in on how things are changing overall. Right. As opposed to like being spread too thin and trying to figure out not just how websites are changing, but how are Facebook ads changing and Google is changing. There are a lot of kind of factors in the digital marketing realm that are just constantly evolving these days.
And that falls into customer experience.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's great that you knew exactly when I said that the answer was no. A lot of people are like, well, we can do that. And I like the flat out, straight up no.
Yeah. I'd rather not. No. And frankly, it's so nice when you can refer a client to someone who is an expert at what they do. No one can be an expert at all things. There's just literally not enough time in the day and not enough power in your brain to be like expert at everything. Mm-hmm. But really to partner with people who are fantastic experts and to just make connections with them. And, I feel like, especially the people we work with and refer to, they take such good care of our clients.
Right.
And they get exactly what they need from them. Like they're getting a really, really high level picture and strategy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's something to be said for that network. And that's actually what makes business run. The everything to all people
Yes.
drains as well. Was that kind of part of the the creep up of the need to pivot within your businesses?
A little bit. I mean, ours started out just as a freelance developer. And when I started to grow my business, I started to grow with other developers. I hired an assistant to take care of like some contract stuff, hired other developers. And there was that natural push from some clients to be like, well, don't you do design too? And then if you do design, don't you do copy? And then if you do copy, can't you do photography? Can't you do videography? And we're a group of very design minded developers, but there's also brilliant designers out there. And I love partnering with people who are really fantastic at what they do. And so it's always been kind of like a natural push. Like I actually had, I worked with a business coach who I adore. And in one of our meetings, she was like, oh, well, you should just be like a one-stop shop. And I'm like, no, there's enough subpar one-stop shops, and there's some great one-stop shops out there too, but I'm like, that's just not who we are and what we do. Like I'm going to let us stay in this genius zone of what we do and really resist that temptation to try to do more.
Yep. That knowing who you are and what you do. I love that you preface that you love your business coach. Every business coach, every business consultant will want to explore an idea. And
Yeah.
sometimes the idea isn't because that's the best idea they have. It's because they're like, how and where do you stand on this? What are
Exactly.
your non-negotiables? And you went into that conversation knowing that. So that was the general thing. And then you found, nope, okay, we know what we're not. We know we don't want to be a one-stop shop. How did you start, and what did you do to start focusing in on exactly what you did do then?
Well, I think, for me, it was part of the focus was also understanding better how we helped people and what our process was. Because it's not just that we do development. Like there are other people out there who do development, but we do strategic development really well. And one of the things, like my genius is actually, frankly, it's not development. Like I was a good developer. My team, they're all way better than I am. But I think of things differently. And I'm really great at helping clients see the connection between their business and the website and to make very smart decisions about what we're going to put on the website. And, from there, it's kind of just been a refining. I feel like everything that we do is just a matter of talking to people better and giving them more specifically what they need. So originally with Alchemy+Aim, we were doing everything within the company. So we would do totally custom websites that would cost tens of thousands of dollars because they were that custom, to starter sites for people. But I will tell you, it's really hard to talk to those two people on the same web page, which is why it's like, for me, there's like the little pivots are like, okay, how do I better speak to people? How do I better like really tend to what their needs are, no matter what stage that they're at? And that's why I started North Star sites, because it let me focus in on Alchemy+Aim as like, this is totally custom websites. That's what we do here. And North Star, we do starter sites for people. And kind of like, I wouldn't just say starter sites too. A lot of the people we work with, they may have done a site 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, and they're ready for something fresh. Mm-hmm. So we're able to give that to them. But, for me, it's like pivots aren't necessarily like gigantic leaps. It's not like I have done weird big pivots in the past, but now it's just more of like these smaller refinements that like just make everyone's lives easier, simpler. Like the work is more clear, the expectations are really well defined, the boundaries are well defined. And like those are the pivots like I'm most curious and about right now, are like, how do you make even sometimes the smaller ones that just really refine what you do and put you like, that really set you up as even more of an expert in the work that you do.
We here at Red Direction can only fund programming with the financial help of our supporter listeners. To learn more about the additional benefits and value supporter listeners receive, go to reddirection.com. Now, back to Jess.
So how do you define the difference between the refinement pivots and the big pivot? Because people use this word pivot all the time. And I'm curious what your definition is, because I'm curious if they know what their definition is.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those words that can have like different meanings depending upon how you're
Yes.
using it. So like for me, it is like there are the small pivots of just, they're like the little shifts. Then there's like the hard right turn into something else.
Yeah.
So I mean that's what I did before I actually started this business is, I was doing I was working at a nonprofit. I was a writer and like really kind of like a strategist there to help with some of their educational outreach things. And I kind of had this like little side business as a developer. And, everyone thought I was absolutely crazy when I quit my well-paying nonprofit job to go work as a freelance developer. Like who does that for reals? And that was a hard pivot. That was, like, I don't know. I almost kind of think like if it feels like you're on ice skates, like you can make a really sharp turn, but you almost fall a little bit first before you get up and going again. And I feel like it's, they can be, I think we always think of pivots as those super hard turns. And we forget that sometimes they can be more subtle. Like it can be as simple as, it doesn't mean that you have to abandon what you're doing. It can just be finding new ways to do it. It's not changing, I had a coach who always said, it's not about changing always the what. Sometimes you have to change how you're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that in the pivot part, the how piece, the underlying, and I wish people would quantify in their conversations because I'm always asking questions. Like you, I'm incredibly curious. I'm curious why, what, where, how, when, the drivers, the constraints. And when somebody says they're pivoting, usually what I find is they are not course corrections, that they are shiny object syndrome.
Yes.
And so that's why I think that's why I have a soapbox around pivots, because I'm like,
that's totally makes a lot of sense, that people are like, they see grass is greener on the other side, sort of, shiny object. And they think life is going to be better like that. That's how I felt that way, like probably a year and a half into my business. I was maxed out on clients. And I really thought I should be a life coach. No, I shouldn't. There's ways I can change my business. And I'm so glad I didn't pursue, being a life coach because there's so much I have to give to technology and to business owners around technology and websites.
Yep.
Like it's fun to do.
I do. By the way, I still do that every few years. Shiny object syndrome. What if I became a social worker? What if I became a lawyer? What if I decided to, doesn't even matter. But you said that and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I still do that once in a while. And I think it's validation for the path that we're on, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely can be. I think it's also just a good reminder. It's a good kind of like check-in just to be really grateful for all that you have too. Of just, like it's not going to be better. Like every industry has challenges and obstacles. And it's just a matter of, where does your heart lie? And maybe it does lie in that other direction. Maybe, you've come to realize that, you were always meant to own an animal rescue and operate that instead. And that's really, it was like everything was just leading up to giving you the confidence and know-how to make that pivot.
Right.
But I think it's a good place to play and just like, what would that be like? And does your heart really sing?
And what about it is missing in your business right now?
Yes.
To me, if you're any commitment to the business, there are clues in there. And so like you're saying, there's this place of curiosity and reflection that we can use to find out, well, how are our values not being met?
Yes.
Personally, how are we feeling and maybe actually really falling short of delivering on our mission? And those are incredibly important. So, now, did you make a big pivot this last time around? Do you consider Alchemy+Aim and North Star Sites to have been a big pivotal moment?
I don't think it was a big pivot. For me, it was more just a refinement. Again, it was just, it was almost like just cleaning house a little bit and saying like, oh, I thought these were all in the same house, but it turns out that they're two different ones because we can talk to people better that way. And even I'm in the process with a friend of mine starting a new company. And again, it kind of takes a little bit of what I do and it puts it into a new house, really. And what that allows us to do is give more attention to the whole process in a different way, and to say like, oh, but there's also these things that we can teach people and these things that we can offer them, and we can offer them in this other more coherent way, while simultaneously creating new boundaries and expectations, and just kind of honestly taking some things off my plate so that I can go deeper with some clients.
So
So
how,
I don't,
okay,
they're
I
not
see
big.
it. Yeah. And I see you looking at this, and each refinement is a new business unit, a separate entity.
Not always, but in this case,
In
yes.
this case, yes. Okay. So for this example that we're using, I'm noticing that. And I'm like,
Yes.
well, that's interesting, because I'm like, I only want the right products that I can actually really do under one brand and under one thing. So I'm curious, because I know I might, I think it's 50-50 out there, right? There are a lot of people
Yeah.
that will have a combination of that and different businesses and different business pieces. But when they're so similar, like what you're talking about, we're taking pieces of what's happening and we're doing it differently over here. And we're taking pieces of what happened and we're talking to somebody different over here. What's the path that you use to decide whether or not to put it under the same umbrella or give it a different umbrella, since they're all in the, I would say, since they're all in the same section of the market?
Yeah. Yeah. They're all on websites, really, is what
Yeah.
it comes down to. For me, it was really that I was discovering pain points in everything being under the same umbrella.
Uh-huh.
You know, there were misplaced expectations very often. Sometimes like things that I didn't even know were expectations on the client side. And I think there's also, you know, for me too, someone who needs a very custom website, um, they're at a different level of business, and their pain points are different than someone who's just getting started with their business.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's just what, like, the needs and the problems that they're facing are different.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's kind of been the biggest shift, is like just understanding like who am I talking to, and uh, can I do it under one umbrella? Sometimes you legitimately can absolutely do it everything together, but sometimes like it makes more sense to take a little piece and put it elsewhere, whatever that might be.
Mm-hmm. Does that dilute your time and your ability to focus on each one, since each one needs leadership, each one needs strategy? How do you reconcile the thoughtfulness and the direction and the time that it takes to do each one of those?
I think you have to be very, very intentional when you set it up.
Yeah.
So I am very, very present in Alchemy+Aim. My team at North Star is very present in North Star.
Mm-hmm.
I am not present in North Star in the same capacity at all, but I provide guidance and strategy, and I lead that team. And I also, you know, what's really fantastic is when you find team members who can shape the company themselves too.
Yep.
So that becomes part of it, is finding the right team members who can be leaders, so that they don't need, like, they may need my strategic vision and guidance, but that's not like a, you know, 40-hour per week job. That's like, I know they're going to come to me with the right questions and with, you know, ideas that we can look at together. And so it almost feels like more advisory at times. So you just have to set it up in the right way. If I set that up so that I had to be in both businesses simultaneously and now in a third too, like I would have to either clone myself, probably stop sleeping,
I know, right?
you know, like
yeah.
It's all about the setup from day one, really, for me.
Exactly. And who else is around? Because I know
Yes.
the businesses that I see fail so it's great to hear you say that, because the businesses that I see fail, they haven't done that. And usually by the time they bring me in, it's a little too late to save everything. So something will have to be redone. And so that's interesting that you're being intentional about it, and and it sounds like then there's the buy-in from everybody else too. Here's how we all are going to show up to this, and we're very clear on it. And sometimes when we're clear and somebody else isn't, those same problems still show up. And now we're just talking about the people problems, which comes back to, that's when it gets easy to pivot. because that typically drives, by the way, that's a shiny object syndrome, but it typically drives, well, what else could we be doing? Are we in the right place? Could we be doing this? Do we make that here or there or whatever? And I think it's really interesting to hear you talk about that, because, what's in and what's out is actually a really hard skill to learn and to stick to. It's ruthless, Brandi. It's not even, there's prioritization and there's decision making, but in the end, you've got to be ruthless about what's in and what's out around those boundaries. And I know you've mentioned boundaries several times through our conversation.
Yeah. I mentioned boundaries because it's also one of my greatest lessons that I'm always constantly learning.
You and me both.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the latest one for you? What's your latest lesson around boundaries?
Really, like this summer, it's really been all about like asking for help.
Yeah.
Like, and even just kind of putting the boundary around what is the work that I do internally. Because sometimes you think of boundaries as external, like, oh, I need to put a boundary between me and my client, or and tell them that they can't call me at 8 p.m. on a Friday night. But sometimes it's those internal boundaries too, of like, I am lying to myself by saying I have to do this. Yes, this needs to be done, but I also have a fantastic team of people and I can ask for help. Or even if there's someone not on my team, maybe I can find someone who's going to be fantastic and collaborate with me on this so that I don't have to do that. And it's about a lot of those personal boundaries of like, and on Saturdays and Sundays, I am not going to spend all day working. Like, I am going to take time off. So I'm doing a lot of like internal boundarying and just kind of calling myself out on the lies that I tell myself of like, oh, it has to be me. No, it doesn't. Like, I can ask for help. It's true.
Right. Yeah. That's an interest. I hear you on that. They show up all the time for me too. And, before this, I know we were talking about your cats and we were talking about my kid.
Yeah.
And thankfully, we're still not quite in school yet. So there's been no running and no pounding. I actually think the word romping, by the way, came from kids stomping around the house. Or running, stomping, romping. Isn't that funny? And I was like, maybe I need to try that sometime. How will that help me when I'm frustrated or have pent up energy? And so to look outside, it also seems like you look outside yourself a lot through books, through the people around you, through what you can learn from your cats. I know I use my husband and my child, in addition to my clients, all the time as the places that I learn. And you said you were curious. You're curious about a lot of things. And that's my number one value. Personally, my number one personal value is curious. And, so I'm thinking about that in relationship to the pivots that you've done and the fact that you're very intentional about what you're doing. So tell us a little bit about your next goals. I mean, knowing that you're intentional, knowing that you have these things, you think about what goes under the same umbrella or not. Where are you going with Alchemy+Aim and North Star and this new company that is beginning?
Yeah. So really with Alchemy+Aim, like that's the most exciting for me because we're really looking at deepening the relationships that we have with some of our clients. And we're actually getting into profit sharing models with them because there's always that question of like, okay, how do I grow? So I can grow by doubling my team and doing more, discrete projects. I'm like, or I can grow in other interesting ways. And I've always been a relationships-based person. Like it's honestly, it's why I love the work I do because I get to know these incredible human beings, collaborators, clients, just team members, everyone across the board. I just, love people. And I'm like, how interesting would it be to take that to the next level and to support them in different ways? And just to look at how we do more together. How do we support them? Because so many of them are, operating as either a solopreneur or they have a small team. And like, what can me and my team do to support them even more? So that's kind of like the little shifting that we're doing right now in Alchemy+Aim, which feels so good. The new company, which is called Interstellar, it'll be called Interstellar Support in full. But
I like that everything's spaced with you. It's fantastic. You were like speaking to my heart.
Well, you know what it is I also have a background in physics and astrology, astronomy particularly.
Yeah, astronomy.
I did my internship when I was doing physics was in gravitational lensing of dark matter. So I'm like, I am totally like that geek who like looks at the universe and just is in awe. So it kind of has oddly naturally evolved that these things are named what they are. And, Interstellar is going to be so much fun. So my partner and I, she has a business in tech as well. And she's always been in her business as well, like similar to me. We've both been in our businesses. We're talking to the clients, we're doing some of the work. Our challenge is to stay CEOs and visionaries of Interstellar and to be strategic about hiring the team that's going to lead the company and drive, what it becomes. And we will stay visionaries and CEOs, but it's going to be hard for us because we're not used to solely being that. We're used to getting our hands dirty and doing the work. So I'm excited to kind of like explore how that works as well, because I'm going to have to boundary myself there too and say, I've hired great people. I trust them, well, what things do I need to build more trust with them maybe in time? What do they need to show me? Like, what do we need to do? So it kind of all feels like part of the evolution of being a business owner and an entrepreneur, of just, stepping sometimes from, that role as doer, and being behind the work and, beginning to be more strategic to running a business in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You heard it here, people. Thanks for listening into this Uncharted. Brandi is fantastic. She has some great tidbits to share. I have multicolors on my piece of paper of notes. Yes, our regular listeners know that that's also a norm for me. The cooler the conversation, the more colored notes I have. So Brandi, thank you for being here today. I appreciate everybody that's listening in on this Uncharted as we are working together, facing uncertain times by learning and sharing through the program that we have brought to you today. Until next time, go to the website Red Direction and check out some of our other podcast programs.
We here at Red Direction can only fund programming with financial help from our supporter listeners. To learn more about the additional benefits and value-added supporter listeners receive, go to reddirection.com. Chart your own course by taking advantage of Red Direction's Unstuck Quick Consulting Services and our vast library of information on the website. Visit reddirection.com. Remember, preparedness and the right perspective is absolutely necessary when you find yourself somewhere uncharted.